Hello and welcome to Gav Tries to Fix, or in this case, Gav ultimately boshes a Raspberry Pi into. And this time I'm looking at a Commodore 64 Mini. These are quite cheap things that you can buy, but I bought a broken one because that's the kind of person I am. It came with an HDMI cable, which was very gratefully received, and a joystick, which is a USB joystick. Pretty neat. And it's just so cute. It's really diddums. It's really, really tiny. The keyboard aren't real keys. It's just a single piece of plastic. I had a good faff about with that joystick, but it was described on the eBay listing as powerless. It wouldn't power up. And sometimes those are really, really quick fixes. I was just shaking it, see if I could get a rattle going. So placed it on my workbench and started plugging it into a monitor. I've got an app called Orion on my iPad that I can connect HDMI to it. So I got this USB Mini Micro. It's micro, isn't it? Plugged that into the wall, and the power light is not lighting up, or if it is, it's so faint you can't really tell. That's mostly just reflection off the light above it, if not entirely. So I decided to pull it apart, and I figured the screws must be under those rubber feet. So I just did a completely, look at that cack-handed job of removing those rubber feet. Shocking. I should have used a different tool, but I just razored my way in. This is a cheap little thing. It's got weights in there. It's got those 3 metal weights, and it's got a board, which is about the size of a Raspberry Pi, which will come in useful. So I then started to test that it was getting power. It was. The 5 volts from the USB was coming through, and the pins looked good. Time to get into a bit of a deeper investigation. I started connecting that LED back up, but I connected it to the wrong thing, and then it lit up a little bit. So I connected it to the wrong output. So it shows that power is getting around the board, but the LED power isn't right, which suggests that other power on the board isn't right. So maybe a short. It's not completely dead. Stuff is happening on there, but it ain't right. That boy ain't right. Well, it's a teeny weeny board, so time to crack out the microscope and have a look. Here's some footage taken on my microscope. I've examined the board, and there's hours and hours and hours of this. But I looked through the most obvious connections, like the USB sockets and the power sockets, and obviously I've been through all this with my multimeter. And I came across this thing that looked like a baked bean wearing a belt, like a theta symbol. It takes me some time to focus it, but it turns out to be a Zener diode, but it looked like it's like leaking or something. It looks like it's cracked, but I bought a load of these off the internet. I mean, I've no idea what value this is or how I would even work that out. But yeah, look at it. It looks like it's cracked or leaking, but I bought a bunch off the internet and they all looked pretty similar. Here I'm having a look at some and just put them side by side. I got an enormous pack there, surface mount Zener diodes, Zener. And I went through a few packs and couldn't find one with the same coloured markings. Mine will have blue markings and were labelled on the packaging, and I don't really know what that is. I don't have a diagram of the circuit board, so I don't really know what's what here. So I didn't take the step of replacing it. But because of the way that all the replacements looked, I figured that this was actually a sound component. I spent an excruciatingly long time looking for shorts. I didn't find anything for sure, but I did find a weird power situation. So you can't see my multimeter here, but the readings on these pins were like 3 volts lower than the other side of the pin. However, there's perfect continuity across the pin itself, if that makes any sense. The readings in terms of resistance just didn't look right, and they didn't match what the other one of these little power plugs was set for. And it seems to me that, I mean, this wouldn't light up the LED, right? So it seems to me that something was up, but I couldn't figure out what. Here's another angle on that component. I spent quite a lot of time metering it, and it just didn't seem right. So I decided to try to take it off. I couldn't see anything physically obvious. There was no other indication of anything faulty. It was the only shot I had. I tried to get it off with hot air and with a soldering iron, and this is a slightly blurry result. It's covered in flux. It was starting to melt. I couldn't find a way to get it off without melting the plastic. So I was out of luck here. I kind of gave up on this.
It was actually the kids' idea.
because they said what you got here, you could just get rid of that board, doesn't work, put something else in there. I was quite amazed by their ingenuity. Well, having failed to repair the main board, I've dug out an old Raspberry Pi that I used to use for Pi hole, and I've connected it via an HDMI adapter. I've had to put this in HDMI safe mode for the time being because I couldn't get it to connect at all. So I'm going to try configuring the C64 Mini's joystick. Holding it down, holding it down, holding it down. No dice. It's booting up. See, it loads all these different systems that it can support. So this is going to be superior to the C64 Mini. One gamepad detector. No, it's going to be the Xbox one, isn't it? I'm going to give that a go. I'd much rather use that. Oh, never mind. Microsoft Xbox 360 pad. So I've run all the updates. I've stuck a couple of games on a USB. And I've also transferred a couple to the operating system. The big problem I've got is the joypad configuration, right? If I press A and nothing happens, I don't think I configured the joypad right. The game, what it was is that's the select button, not that one. I don't know how I'd not hit that. I have this keeps coming up, which indicates that this is drawing, well, it hasn't got enough power, so I'm going to have to test this and see if it's giving enough ampage. But when I was running this exact board as a Pi hole, it did seem to fail, so I don't 100% trust it. I might swap it out. The under voltage thing might be because this board's not great, and you see that red light blinks every so often, or it might be that over there that's not outputting 2 amps, or it might be this HDMI draws a lot, because I've got the HDMI configured in safe mode because I couldn't get anything coming up on Orion. I'm using software called Orion on here, which allows me to use a dongle to get HDMI input on my iPad because I don't have a HDMI screen in here. Picture's sharper without HDMI in safe mode, and I got the boost set to 8 and it seems to be working. Maybe I can take it down a bit and check it. Z02, I own it. I mean, I got a couple of ROMs to test and I delete them all. I got this one, I own this, so I'm going to play this. So it seems that the RetroPie could be a valid replacement. However, this is the Pi, this is the original board. So the HDMI port's in the same place. The power supply isn't. So maybe I could run some power there. But yeah, the power in would be moved to there. So it would be, and it would have access here. Yeah, I'd need to file this up as well so that it would be able to close. But yeah, removing this post, yeah, it's got to go. That post has got to go. That post possibly have to go, possibly not. And then I'd have to build something in here, put some like soft stuff in there for it to sit on. But yeah, I think it's viable just about. So once I decided to cut the holes, there was nothing left for it but to get my rotary tool out. It's like a Dremel kind of thing I got from Aldi for about 22 quid ages ago. And it took me absolutely yonks. I'm also using a scalpel kit, which has got a kind of chisely thing in it. Removing all the posts, seeing if it would make enough room. What I'm doing is just taking off a tiny bit of plastic, seeing if it makes enough room, trying again. Now this process took me about 45 minutes. I've obviously sped it up an awful lot here, so it's probably quite a stomach churning watch. But yeah, this really did take ages. I didn't enjoy doing it that much because I was just like, I'm just brutalising this casing, but I couldn't really think what else to do to actually use the casing because the board's hosed. I don't seem to be able to fix it. And the Pi not only works, but is superior in every respect. You know, even the Commodore 64 emulation is probably going to be pretty good on a RetroPie. So yeah, got me scalpels and cleaning it up. I do use a bit of wet and dry and a bit of sandpaper at various points to smooth things off. But it took ages to calibrate it. I just kept having to take a tiny bit more off here, a tiny bit more off there. And you get in the position where you're shaving your mustache, you end up looking like Hitler if you're not careful. So the RetroPie works fine as a replacement for a similar sized board for the C64 Mini. However, I don't want to just leave it in the case and have it floating around. I need to be able to pull cables in and out, you know. So I bought some nylon posts on the advice of my mate John, and I've got some araldite, regular araldite, to glue it on. So here what I'm doing is I'm sort of sanding down these posts until they're going to be the right height so that they can mount on that quite badly wounded piece of plastic, really, that I've modified, shall we say, being generous, to allow the Raspberry Pi to occupy the space. I mean, what I should have done is got a smaller Raspberry Pi. I mean, I'm sure there are lighter versions. But anyway, I glue them into place, and then I need to get a bit of weight on top once it's in the right place. But it took me a few goes because I'm opening and closing the casing to try to make sure it's all in the right place. But araldite I left eventually to bond overnight, hoping that it would be a strong enough bond so that it would take the stress of cables going. New board, original board. And now I've realised a mistake I made with these posts. I used very thin posts, and what I should have done is used the thick posts that are really wedged in. Those posts would have been right size for this, but oh well, oh well. And so for what it's worth, I reassembled the Commodore 64 Mini, which now has none of the original electronics inside it whatsoever. It has a Raspberry Pi, which is a board that's about the same size as the original board. I've acetoned on some nylon posts, which aren't quite as thick as they should be, but this is my first time doing this. I'm gluing the rubber feet back on, and then I decided to try the C64 Mini joystick. Somebody on the internet is saying that it should work. Connected it up, powered it all up, but it didn't seem to work. So here I am using Orion to visualize what's going on the screen. It's got this like HDMI adapter for iPad, but no, it just doesn't detect it. Jab all the buttons, so it might be faulty. That looks a lot better than it does on my CRT. Gosh, I can see all the striations on the road. It looks pretty awesome, actually. Wow, they got me. I've got a website. Remember those? gavd.co.uk.